Okay, we are live. I'm really excited to be joined by Dr. Amy Johnson for this very special webinar about getting over your bad habits for the Powerful Men's Group. Amy and I will be covering any of your questions. We'll be talking about habits in general, in which she's an absolute expert and really helps people to get over that. She's released a new book about this very subject. So I'm very excited to have you on, Amy. And like I said before we started broadcasting, I just love your commitment to sticking with this, because I saw you yesterday in London, and today you're back in the US and still taking some time out to help us out. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, ever since we talked about this a couple months ago, I think it was, I really look forward to it. I think it's this, everybody has habits, even if it's just habitual thought, whatever it is, we all get caught up in something. And I just love talking about this.
Fantastic. Well, if you're live on the webinar, feel free. We've got a little chat function on the side. Say hello. Hogne, hi. Great to have you here. We'll be talking a little bit, and there'll be definitely an opportunity for you guys to ask questions later on. But if there's anything that we say, I mean, this is the great thing about a webinar as opposed to doing static interviews. If there's something we've not covered, just shoot a message on the side of the screen. Good evening, Arthur. Hello, the other Arthur. We've got two Arthurs. Yeah, just feel free to shout and either give us some praise and tell us how wonderful we're doing or not, or if you need explanation around something or anything like that, feel free to just chime in and use that chat functionality on the side of the screen.
Yeah, cool.
Is there anything you want to say, Amy, before we get stuck in and we get started on this topic?
No, I'm excited. I'm ready to dive right in.
Great. Okay, Nitan's here. Hello, Nitan. I know you struggled to get on the last webinar. Great to have you on board here. Okay, so really, I thought we could just start, and maybe this is going overly simplistic, but in your mind, Amy, and we've titled this "Get Over Your Bad Habits," but I'm putting kind of habits and addictions together. Is there a difference between is an addiction just a habit that's got out of control? What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't, we could probably make up some definitions, but when I think of it, I just like to think of them as the same. I think sometimes when we think about addictions and it feels like it's more of a substance or it has more of a brain component, I don't even know how accurate that is, but most of all, I think it just gives people the feeling of ooh, I have this addiction, and that's one thing people have said to me recently after reading the book and stuff is oh, it really was helpful to think of this, whatever it is, as just a habit I have, even things like insecurity, pessimism, that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, that's just a habit. That's not who I am. That's not my personality. If it's drinking or drugs or anything like that, it's not I'm a junkie, I'm an alcoholic. It's a habit I have. So for me, I like habit just because it sounds a little simpler. And as we'll talk, we'll see this. I do think it is very simple and it's not so personal. So that's why I like to use that word. But if you're used to thinking of addiction, just do whatever works for you.
I just realized that I've jumped because we've done another webinar for a different group, and I met you. I've just kind of jumped straight in, and what I realize is people might be watching this and going, okay, who's this lady saying that addictions are just habits? What we didn't talk about your background. What makes you qualified to talk about this? You're not just someone who's spouting just good ideas. You do this work, and you've got some background in this.
Yeah. So my background is I was a psychologist for a long time. I now am more of a coach, and I teach from the 3 principles understanding. In terms of habits and addictions, I've had many, so that's where my background is. So basically, I mean, in a nutshell, I went through a period of really extreme anxiety, which I do consider kind of a mental, emotional habit. I used to smoke. I more recently, although it's been a little while now, had a binge eating disorder. Disorder again, I think of it as a habit, but I went to psychologists and therapists at the time and was diagnosed with this and had it for 8 years. And I didn't understand it. And it really did kind of run my life during those 8 years because I didn't understand it. And then kind of coming to see a little bit about our true nature, the nature of our habit, our thinking, just seeing more about the things that we're going to talk about here today, I essentially kind of just walked away from that habit. And that shouldn't have happened. Like, there's no, I mean, no therapist, in fact, every therapist I saw told me, this is probably going to be part of your life forever, but we're going to help you try to cope with it. And they said the same thing about my anxiety. You're an anxious person. When things get hard in life, you're going to fall back on a lot of anxiety, but don't worry, we'll give you some tools so you can like breathe through it, or, manage it better, or cope with it better. And what I found is that that's not true at all. It wasn't true for me. It hasn't been true for me. And it's not true for lots and lots of people that I work with. It's not about, I have this issue, this is part of who I am, and I'm gonna try to deal with it better. There can be a big kind of jump, a vertical leap in our understanding about things, to where suddenly the things we do, again, no matter what your habit is, the way you feel or the things you do just look different. And that stuff really can just sort of fall away. So I don't know. Anyway, that's, once I kind of left my binge eating habit behind, I got really inspired to share this with other people, because that habit in particular is a huge one, but it really is all the same, whatever your habit is. And I'm so not like a promotional person like this, but I'm actually signing this book right now to send to someone. So I have it right next to me. So I recently wrote this book. It came out in January, called Little Book of Big Change, where I basically just talk about this understanding with regard to habits.
And this is something that you're quite passionate about, and you work with a lot of people around this, and you've helped a lot of people get over their bad habits, get over their addictions. And have quite dramatic changes in their life. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
I love it. And I've seen, the success rates with this, and it's, success rates is a funny thing, but when it's something like a habit, obviously we want to leave it behind, and kind of seeing this understanding that we're going to talk about, it's really, really helpful for people.
Brilliant. Good. So, you talked about, it's all the same. And you talked about your binge eating. And I know, and I'm not going to embarrass anyone by saying any names, but I've had people contact me before this webinar who've got their own particular version of that, right? For someone, it might be smoking. For someone else, it might be drinking. For someone else, it might be porn. I've had a whole range of things that people have contacted me about to say, look, we're actually, and it's almost like secretive, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling to get over this. Yeah. And I know when I've had my kind of bad habits, it feels very personal. It feels very personal to me, or it has done, especially in the past, less so now. But, is it really that simple? Is it really all the same? Or is there are there other factors involved? So like certain people, do they have a certain kind of personality which makes them more likely to smoke, or get involved in something? Or is it something about their personality which makes them addicted to things? Is there something else going on? Because it sounds very simplistic to say it's all thought.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is very simple, but at the same time, we do have things like, it's not, and I don't know why, but certain people are drawn to different things. For me, like food just popped out of the woodwork as like, this is a thing. And it just, for other people, it's other things. So but is that meaningful? Not really. So let me just say a little bit, if it's all right, like kind of how and why we can sit here and say all habits are essentially the same. As I'm sure as I know and I'm sure a lot of the listeners today know, like, we're healthy. We come born okay, right? No matter what your habit is, I don't care what it is. I know for a fact that you weren't born doing it. No one here.
no one was born and started smoking,
No, in the hospital. No one came out with a cigarette. And even habits like worry and stuff that really, I've talked with people who can remember worrying from the age of 2, 3. That's kind of rare. Usually kids are pretty free until at least 3 or 4, but not always, but still, it's a learned behavior. And I think that's just, on one hand, it's very obvious. On the other hand, it's kind of profound. These are all things that we learned, which means they're not that deep. They're not fundamental to us. They cannot be part of who we are because we've existed without them. And even now, even today in your lives, for me, when I was binging, sometimes I would binge 3-4 times in a day. I would still have a few hours that day where maybe I wasn't or I felt okay. And what is that? It's so easy to dismiss that and say, yeah, but let's look at the problem again. And part of that is it's all well-meaning. Part of that is we're just constantly told, if you want to fix this, you better look at it. So we're constantly looking back to the problem, the problem, calling it a problem, reminding ourselves about the problem. But it's so important to see that there is a huge part of you, the part of you, that is free of this, that was born free of it. And in your blueprint, this is not there. It's something that is in our thinking. And I always do this with my hands because I think there's like us. And then there's like the surface. It's like the ocean, right? There's like the bottom of the ocean. There's no problem at the bottom of the ocean. It's calm and peaceful. I mean, I've never been there, but I assume it's calm and peaceful and all is well at the bottom of the ocean. But that surface of the ocean, there's all kinds of stuff that happens, from calm and peaceful to a hurricane to everything else. And, that's kind of how we are. And we obviously innocently, easily get caught up in what's going on. We're looking at the commotion, and that's a habit in itself, right? I mean, that's just, we grow up, we get kind of more in our heads. Kids don't do that as much, kids are just kind of hanging out and there's commotion, but whatever. But as we grow up, we kind of get more and more in our heads and we're looking at the waves and what are they doing? And that's what we do with ourselves too. So that's how we get kind of caught up in the passing, fleeting thoughts, behaviors, all of that kind of stuff. But it's really important to see, that our basic foundation is not habit inflicted. It is free of this habit. It knows how to be free of whatever your habit is. And it's just healthy and well, and it's okay. So what that kind of means is, as we grow up and we start to feel uncomfortable, because it's such a fundamental part of who we are to want to feel peaceful. That is who we are. It is what we are. There's such a draw to get back there. And we see this in our language, like whenever, and I don't care, I just talked with someone, really depressed client, he's been depressed for a long time. He still says, I just want to feel like myself again. I just want to get back home. And so it's like, it's in our language. We know that that's how we're supposed to feel, but we're normal, and normal humans don't feel that a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, and that's okay. So what happens is, we start thinking and we don't feel well, and we forget that the bottom of the ocean is there. We forget that we're never told that this is just thought and stuff. And we get caught up in it, and it doesn't occur to us that we can step back and just let that settle down. So we step forward. I heard this from Bill Pettit. He says, human beings are the only animals on earth that when we're lost, we run faster. Every other every other animal on earth, when they're lost, they stop. If you see the animal apparently out in nature, if it's lost, doesn't know what's happening, it stops, and it kind of just lets its mind settle and it regains its bearings. Well, humans don't really do that. We go faster. So we go faster into, oh my gosh, I don't feel good. There's a problem here. Let me fix it. Let me drink this, smoke this, eat this, watch this, whatever it is. And in a weird way, it really does kind of help us. It takes the edge off for a minute. And then our brains kind of learn that, right? Or suddenly we're not looking at the problem. We did something and we felt a tiny bit better. Now, not perfect, not back home at the bottom of the ocean, but better. And your brain loves you, and your brain wants you to feel better. So your brain says, ooh, do more of that. That helped. That distracted you. And it's dumb little things like checking your phone, like I do constantly. Like, why am I doing this again? Why am I checking my phone again? I don't know. Quieting my mind for a second, And so it's everything from that to the more destructive things. But your brain starts to remember, and then suddenly it's just, I'm simplifying this, but it's like the habit kind of takes over. The cycle kind of starts to take over to where your mind, every time you don't feel well, even sometimes when you do think you feel okay, your mind throws out that thought. So it's just a thought that shows up. It's, hey, do this, go drink that, go eat that, and when we take that thought really seriously and we start to act on it more and more, it just gets stronger. But when we can see, oh, every time I'm wanting to check my phone or do whatever I do, okay, it's just because I have some stuff on the surface. You know, it's just thought there. Let me just let that settle down. It sounds so simple. It's not always easy. It's not always easy at all. But it does start to kind of reverse that, and we get to get back to home base in a little bit more of a natural way. So this started by talking about how it's all the same. I mean, that's the basic human thing that every human on earth goes through. And sometimes we get caught up in ways that we're looking outside in ways to try to feel better that start to look really compelling, and we just get caught up in them. And again, I don't know, and I actually don't even know if any scientist knows why some people gravitate toward different things, but it kind of doesn't matter, you know. I mean, I think it's helpful to know it's not about you. Like when I was binge eating, I thought I was disgusting, had no discipline. It was all about food, and I didn't even like the food I was eating. I didn't even taste it. It was a way to just feel better. And that's true for everybody and all their habits. We might think we really like whatever it is we're doing, but what we like is the feeling. We like feeling better, and that's all it is, you know.
So you know, you made a really interesting thing about not feeling good about yourself when you were binge eating, and it reminded me that, you know, my strategy for dealing with getting over bad habits when I do things like, you know, checking your phone or, you know, procrastination or anything, was being really tough on myself, right? It was like beating myself up, and like we put all these strategies together of like how to stop ourselves. And I know, you know, people have tried all sorts of things. Yeah. And for me, what I found is that that's a really, really bad strategy. It doesn't work.
Right.
But it's one that's really compelling, and it's one that's taught. How do you work with clients? I mean, do you point them to be nicer to themselves, or is there a halfway house? How do you work with clients around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's different for everyone, like what their, like you said, like what their kind of strategy is. So once someone starts to see that for themselves, it gets a lot, again, I don't even want to say it gets easier, but at least gets clearer. At least they're seeing it more accurately. So like for you, now that you see pretty clearly that that's your strategy, just by seeing it, you start to wake up to it more. The next time you're being really hard on yourself, you know, you might get caught up in it for sure, but you're more likely, because you see something about that now, to see, oh, okay, I'm just trying to, ironically, I'm just trying to feel better by being really cruel to myself. You know, there's no logic in it. It doesn't make sense, but in some way it does, and it's helpful. So I think it's for each person just kind of seeing, what does it look like that does for you? And then if we need to, looking and seeing like, okay, well, whatever that is, that's not a great strategy. You don't need to do that. And in fact, everything we want, which is just to feel like ourselves again, that's what every single only thing any of us care about. We just don't take the direct route there, right? We think we care about all these other things. All we care about is feeling good. So as soon as we see that, I don't know, it just starts to really simplify things.
So someone might be still saying, and I'm paraphrasing, guys, please jump in on the chat on the side and ask your questions if you've got any here. But someone might be thinking, okay, so what do I do?
Yeah. So, you know, what you do is see as much as you can see about it. And it doesn't mean there aren't going to be things to do. Like, so for me, the way I always think of it and thought of it, if you just think about this in brain terms, our lower brain is a part of our brain that's really habit oriented. And it's also very survival oriented. It's the most basic part of our brain, right? It keeps us alive. So what happens is we don't feel well, and we think, oh, it like sets off these little alarm bells. So we start doing whatever occurs to us to do, which if you have a habit, it's usually your habit, so it's going to help you feel better. And that starts to feel like it's almost a matter of life or death, because it's really close to that part of your brain. It's like a survival instinct, right? So you get kind of caught up in that. The thing is, what we usually don't see, so here's what I want everyone to do, is to understand a little bit about how your brain works and understand how this is all happening. So what's actually going on is your lower brain is like throwing a fit. It's like, I don't feel good. This is something's wrong here. You know, give me my stuff. Give me my behavior, my whatever. But it's kind of like a little kid having a temper tantrum. Now, my 4-year-old has temper tantrums all the time, and we don't give him everything he wants when he's screaming at us on the floor to give it to him. Sometimes we might. We really just want him to get up in public, but we do that knowing that that's not the best strategy. That's not great parenting, right? I mean, what you do when a kid's throwing a temper tantrum is you disengage as much as possible, or I see this kid, I see what's going on for this person. Let me try to see it from their point of view, you know, and really just kind of be with them in that feeling. But the thing about your brain and the thing about kids when they temper tantrum is that it's not going to keep going forever. It's thought. Everything is. Our whole experience is. So we have this painful experience of our brain saying, you know, whatever it's telling you to do, get the phone, go on Facebook again, whatever it is. And we start to see that in a different way, where we're not collapsed with it. It doesn't look like, yes, this must happen. It starts to look, and again, just by insight, just by understanding, we have a little bit of distance from it. And it starts to look like, oh yeah, yep, there's my brain. There's my brain doing that again. Or there's that pull. There's that pull again. But you, in your infinite wisdom, have a choice. You can go with the pull, and sometimes you will, and that's okay. It does not mean anything about you. It just means in that moment you went with the pull. Big deal. But you won't always go with the pull. And the more you see that, you start to see, okay, there's a big pull to do this, and it would feel really good, but I know what's going on here. I know that that's going to fade. I know that I'm actually healthy. I know this doesn't actually do anything good for me. So I'm going to hang out and let this experience pass. And, you know, and it's just like anything in life that when we're blessed with that bit of insight, where we can feel a bunch of stuff that we're not thrilled with, but we kind of just let it do what it's there to do. Let it pass, let it be there, whatever it is. It just moves along, because everything in life does. Every experience does.
So I'm kind of hearing two things. I'm hearing one is, and I've come to turning this into a how-to, but I'm kind of hearing two things. One is, or maybe three things. One is kind of being aware that this is nothing more than thought. Mm-hmm. And so the second thing, I guess, is like letting that pass as best as you can. And then the third thing is, when if you do give into it, being kinder to yourself. And if you do those three things, then you kind of weaken that mental pattern that you've created, which has been strengthened all of those times. And as you beat yourself up, you strengthen it. But this is kind of doing the opposite. Is that right?
It's okay. It's right. It's totally right. Except, if you set out to do it as a how-to, it's not going to be easy. So those are, okay, so it's almost like those are the steps, but it's like the steps come last. It's like when you see this about yourself, your health, your habit, why it's there, when you see it's just a well-meaning solution to something that feels like a problem, which is not feeling good, like the insight comes first, I think. And once people see that, it plays out exactly like you just said. So once you see something about it, it plays out in that, oh, I'm still feeling this pull because I have a brain and my brain still does this, but I'm going to let that pass. And it plays out like, I don't know, the third one was, like if I don't let it pass in a moment, okay, I'm not going to beat myself up over that. So does that make sense? It's just like, I don't want it to be a how-to, only because it can be a how-to, but then we're in it, and it might help, it might work, but then we're back to using discipline and willpower and deciding here's the strategy and the plan, you know what I mean? And that's not horrible. Like sometimes that's what we do in the beginning. That's okay. I just know it can be even better than that. So if we kind of see something about it first, those how-tos start to just naturally happen.
So I really want to open this up because I know what you're talking about, and I'm trying to ask questions that I think people want to ask. But I'd really love if there's anyone who's on the webinar that if there's a habit or addiction you're struggling with that you want to ask Amy, this is your opportunity to do that. If you also want to remain anonymous and you don't want me to announce your name, I'm happy to do that as well. Just kind of put that in the chat box on the side, and we can do that as well. Because I find that there's real value in, making it very personal. That's one of the great things about doing these webinars. So if there's anyone in that situation, feel free to jump in and ask your question or ask about where you're coming from. Or if this is really helpful and you want us to keep talking, then feel free to let us know about that too. So while we're waiting for that, Amy, I've got a quick question for you. Let's say you've got a client who comes to you and says, right, I've got this addiction. I hear you're an expert in this field. I'd love for you to help me. And I think I know the answer, but what does that look like? Is it you just typically have a few sessions and you tell them what you've told us and then they get better? Is everyone different? I mean, what does that typically look like?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is different, obviously, and it really is a series of conversations, though. So it's starting probably with a little of what we've been talking about so far, and just really helping them see that. I think the biggest thing I just want to stress again, it's so easy to look at these habits and call them problems. And they create problems in our lives. We don't like them. But for people that start to get that and see, okay, it's actually just my best attempt to feel better. It's a crappy solution, but it's the best solution. It's the solution my brain is used to. And it's just, it's like to kind of start to reverse that, as a lot of times that's kind of some of the early conversations, to just start to understand their habit better. And then what I think is really great to do after we've discussed it a little bit is to have them go out into their life and see how things go, and then be able to come back and we talked about it. I got really caught up in this thought and this urge, and I did my habit the other night. Or I noticed I really wanted to, but I just felt a sense of peace around it, relaxed, and it passed through me. It's almost, I don't want to call it like troubleshooting, but it's great to have some discussion and get them some foundation, some grounding in this, and then to have them go out and live their life a little bit. Then we come back and discuss it and sort of, be able to look at how it shows up. It's a really nice kind of interplay when it happens like that. And for some people, they understand how this works. They get the grounding and they never have their habit again. That's not the norm, but that definitely happens. It's not that uncommon. So, we just talk more about whatever we talk more about. And for other people, it's more of a process.
So Arthur's got a question here. He said he wants to help a friend quit smoking, and suggestions on the way or the angle forward. I might try something. I've not done this before, so this is live experimentation. I think there's a way, Arthur, of me to invite you so you can speak to Amy. If you're up for that, just say yes, and I'll see if I can do that. Because I think it'd be cool to get that interaction going, as Amy said, and getting some of that discussion. So just type yes or no in the chat box and maybe fix your hair and put on some clothes. Okay.
No pressure, Arthur. Fix your hair and put on some clothes.
So I've just invited you. I don't know if you're on the screen. So I've invited you as an attendee. I don't know if you have to click something and maybe you can join us, but I think I've done this once before, almost by mistake, and it worked. Ah, yes. That's Arthur.
Hi. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, yep. We can hear you.
Yeah. Well, it was a nice. I'm a really good space tonight. That's something different. But a friend of mine, actually a friend's couple. The guy they are 48 years old. The guy, he's quit smoking 5-6 years ago. He just quit. by himself, but his wife cannot. So yeah, she's a teacher, and she kind of feels bad about this. So I don't want to push anything, but any suggestions on how I kind of angle this in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how you say it to her, but I'll just tell you kind of something that comes to mind for me is like that she feels bad about it. And I think that's such an important part of this is like helping people see, well, that's what I help my clients see, you help your friends, whatever, that it's not this personal flaw, it's not this weakness in us that, I mean, everybody has been told this. You know, like we really, and it's so easy to buy into because you are feeling kind of bad about yourself. You're doing this thing that you know better. Everybody says, well, what's wrong with me? I know better. I know how horrible smoking is for my health. I know what a bad influence it is around the kids or whatever, you know, and we use that to beat ourselves up even more. Everybody knows better. There's not a person on earth that wants to be doing their habit and thinks it's wonderful. So it's not, so knowing better is like kind of irrelevant, right? It's like we all know better, but we're just doing the best we can to feel a little bit better. And when your brain is really caught in on this idea that says nicotine will help, cigarette will help, mine was too, I remember that. Like it is, and we just believe what our brain tells us. It's really, really, really hard to not just do that, you know? So I think part of it, you know, is always kind of helping her see all the thinking she has maybe around how horrible it is and why could her husband stop, but she can't stop and all that. It just adds more noise. She's doing the best she can. I'm sure there are things that she could do really easily that he can't do. You know, I mean, that's just life. So to kind of see that for ourselves, we're doing the absolute best we can. And then to start to get some idea of like that little pull in your brain, that lower brain. Her lower brain's just screaming. It's like an alarm. In my book, I write about it as like an alarm clock. It's like she set innocently, by smoking, sets that alarm clock. So the alarm clock, like every hour, 2 hours, starts going off, saying it's time for a cigarette. But it truly is, this is not an exaggeration, it is like an alarm clock. Like it really is, because our brain is just a machine. And that machine gets set to kind of emit certain things, certain thoughts. And the problem is we take them seriously. You know, they don't feel good, but we take them seriously. And we say, oh, my machine's telling me to light the cigarette. I can't quit. I want to quit, but I can't. I got to just listen to the machine. But when people start to just get a little insight around that and say, oh, no, this is just a talking machine. My alarm clock can be going off, and I can just pull it out of the wall if I want. I don't have to shut it off. I don't have to get up and go to work if I don't want to. You know, it's like you start to have that different relationship with it, and it just makes a space there, you know. And then a lot of times people just feel a little more confident, and they do whatever they do to finally quit smoking. But I think those are kind of early things that are really helpful, and that most people just never occurs to them. They're just used to looking at, well, how are you going to quit? Cold turkey, or I don't know what you guys have there. Are you going to use the patch? Or are you going to use the gum? Like, that's how we do it here. Or are you going to get hypnotized? Or are you going to get acupuncture? You know, like, but to just see the whole thing in a deeper way really, really helps.
Yeah, because I have done that. I quit. Is feedback here? Do I hear it or?
Amy, if you just put your mic on mute for a second, I think that will stop the feedback.
Okay.
I quit smoking tobacco. No, it's not smoking. Chewing tobacco in Birmingham a month ago, and it was really something that I tried the cold turkey thing many, many times, and suddenly I was in a good space, and I just had it in my pocket, and then it reminded me that I had it. So I had this insight. Well, if this is just what reminds me of it, then I'll just throw it away. So now it's just a reminder sometimes that I have a thought, oh, but now I recognize that as a thought. But now everyone isn't like me or everyone else, but you can have that insight. But she doesn't have that yet. She feels it like it's relaxing. I asked her, what does it do? Well, it relaxes me. I know it's bad, but it relaxes me.
Yeah, and it does relax her. She's right. The thing that's kind of inherent in there that's keeping her kind of stuck is like, I need this to relaxes me. It absolutely does. Versus, I need this to relax. And that one's not true. You know, I mean, so kind of, and for me, again, that kind of came more from seeing like relaxing is our nature. Yeah, she's going to feel, especially as she still has this addiction, she's going to feel all kinds of stuff. And especially if she says, no, I'm not going to have that cigarette, it's not always going to be pleasant or fun. But the feelings she's feeling are going to go away, and she will get back to natural relaxation. That's a tough thing, I think, especially for smoking. I had that when I smoked as well. It was like my social life, and too, I'd go outside to smoke. I'd have my smoker friends. It was a way to unwind, and there's so many cues and triggers. You know, this is what you do at the end of a long day or on your lunch break or whatever. And to just see there's so much thought in there about it, that relaxing is our nature. And right now, yes, the cigarette helps her relax, but she doesn't need it to relax.
I got an insight. I know the insight. I know the answer.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Arthur. That's great. I'm gonna return you as an attendee. So I don't know how to do that. I think I've clicked something. So if you don't go, Arthur, can you just mute yourself? Okay. I'm gonna hide you. There we go. Right. So we got halfway there. We got Arthur on. Well, next time we'll work out how to get him off. So that was really helpful, and it reminded me, Amy, of I got into a little bad habit of chocolate, you know, and I still got a couple of chocolate bars on the side of my computer that people can't see. But I got into this habit of like during the day of like, oh yeah, I need that little thing. That's my break. That's my break. That's my go-to. You know, I work harder than I can, and then that's my break. And what was really helpful, and I kind of heard this again in what you were saying, was I would do that when I was kind of overthinking or stressed or anxious, and then it would look like that was what I needed to do, and then sometimes I'd do that as a habit, not even when I was stressed, right? And what was really helpful for me to know is the things that I tend to do when I'm not clear, the things that I tend to do when I'm like overthinking, the things that I tend to do when I'm anxious. And just being aware of that tends to kind of change something in me. And I kind of heard that again in what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good to see that. Like, it's just, okay, this is my anxious overthinking thing. And, you know, once you kind of know something about that, it just helps you to kind of be more suspicious about that. But yeah, I think, I mean, chocolate's good. You enjoy it, and I'm sure it did in some way. Even if it's just to distract you from what's going on during the day, it made your thinking go somewhere else. So you probably did feel a little bit better. But there's nothing magical about chocolate that did that. And it's the same with anything, you know, it's the same with cigarettes, same with anything in life. We think it's another person or the right job. It's just the whole, you know, life looking a little outside in.
And it's funny, right? Like, just as you said that, my initial reaction was to go, blasphemy! There's nothing magical about chocolate. But it's so, like, it's funny, it's a joke, but it's so ingrained in our culture that we do think that. Like, we think there's special things that can make us feel better, right? And like, we have those excuses. And
then because we believe that, they do. That's the thing. You can even just tell yourself, oh, it's time for a chocolate break, and you already feel better. It has nothing to do with, you don't even have to eat the chocolate. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, when I was going downstairs for my outside cigarette break, I already was feeling better. Yeah. And that just kind of shows you, okay, it's really just our thinking lets go, and we associate it with this thing, but it's our thinking releasing that helps us. So we had a comment from Hogney. So we actually had two. So the first one was at the start of the webinar. He was saying he really enjoyed the audio. So we sent out an audio before this webinar, one that you'd recorded previously for people to listen to. So he was excited to hear what you had to say. And then what he said was, with the perspectives and insights I gained from a challenge that he had, which was helping men get over their porn addiction. He said, combining that with, it blew his mind when you said that when we don't feel as well as we think we do, these thoughts tend to come up. And it said that really hit home for him, and put everything in perspective. So that
So I'm glad Hogney, that you've had some positive impact from this.
Great.
And now we've got Aman. So I'm gonna invite you on as a speaker. So I think something will pop up on your screen that you need to accept. But he's experimenting with changing his identity of how he comes to think of himself as a way to overcome his habits or add new ones. And he's got a question around insights on creating and recreating yourself and your identity regularly. And I've got a feeling that he may get a different answer than he was expecting. So hi, Aman.
Oh, hi, am I live?
You are live. You're live on the internet. Everyone can see you. You're broadcasting millions of people, but don't worry, it's fine.
The millions.
I can't see you guys asking for my permission and stuff. So hi, Ankush. Nice to finally see you and say hi to you.
Likewise. So you're live on the air. You've got world expert Amy Johnson on the end. So please go ahead and ask your question around creating and recreating yourself and your identity.
Okay, cool. Nice to meet you, Amy. And I love the stuff so far. You really know your stuff, so it's a pleasure to take time out of my day to listen to this. I have a question. I'm currently experimenting with identity and the way you view yourself. So, for example, when I'm thinking of breaking habits or creating new ones, for example, if I want to, like, I've started working out a lot more than I used to, and so viewing myself as an athlete has really changed how much I want to work out, my motivation to work out, my resistance to working out. And I wanted to know your thoughts on this, on creating and recreating yourself regularly, creating your identity, and even like if you're a beginner. So for example, when I first started wanting to work out, and I never used to work out regularly, I just thought of myself as an athlete that's just really bad, an athlete that just didn't work out yet. But because I started viewing myself in that way, the motivation started coming, less resistance, and my body responded a lot quicker, faster to it. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on changing your identity.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, I think with stuff like that, like you said, you can see results. Like, it does sometimes help to do that. You change your identity and suddenly you just think of things differently, different things come to mind, you feel more motivated, whatever it is. To me, like, when I hear that, it just sounds a little like there's a lot involved in that. And maybe it doesn't feel that way to you, and that's fine, but it's just an interesting way to kind of look at it, which is like, do we have to do that much? Like, do we have to think of ourselves in this way? And I don't know, it feels a little effortful, and maybe it isn't, maybe it is, doesn't matter. But what's kind of good to know is that when our mind is kind of clear, when you're just kind of in a good place, you're going to do what feels right and makes sense for you. So when you're just hanging out in life and there's not a lot on your mind, if you really want to go work out and work toward that, you're going to. And if you don't, you're not, and that's totally okay. So like, kind of knowing that there's more of that natural motivation in us than it seems like there is sometimes, because I know sometimes it can be like, oh, this is the better way to be, but if it's just a goal of like, I want to exercise more, I want to have an athlete's body, then, and that helps you to think of yourself in that way, that's wonderful. That's fine. I say whatever works for people. I just want to point out that sometimes, you don't have to do it that much. Like, there's probably something in you that really will kind of move you toward those goals if they're really important to you.
Okay, thank you. The reason I said that, sorry, Ankush, is just that because we have all these negative habits, and they pull us in certain directions. So I'm kind of just using the same power of habit, but just channeling it more in a positive way. But I also agree with what you're saying, with the getting present and with the slowing down and with the really getting in the moment. But also I find it's really strong too, because habits are powerful and habits are good. There's a reason, we biologically have them. So it's just kind of re-channeling and refocusing it. Also, I find, like, once you change your identity, your body just responds differently. You don't. For example, if you want to stop binge eating and you become an identity, your new identity is one of, I enjoy food and I only eat enough. I find your body just doesn't release as many hormones to crave the food. Like, I find it fascinating, and that's why I just wanted to hear your comments on it. Yeah.
So,
can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I think it works really well, like you're saying, in terms of dropping identities. Totally true. Like, so many people I talk with have the identity of being a binge eater or a drinker or a whatever, a lazy person who doesn't work out or whatever. And to see, wow, I made that up. That is not who I am. That's the surface. That's the weather today. It's like the surface of the ocean thing. Like, it's not, the ocean isn't hurricane-ish. There happens to be a hurricane. Huge difference. So to see, like, that's not who I am. Like, so to drop those identities, hugely helpful. And I totally get what, I mean, you're right. Sometimes we can add identities, and that can be helpful as well. But it's just seeing, adding identities, again, if it works, wonderful. But it's kind of, it's telling ourselves something and then deciding to live into that. And, dropping the identities almost brings us to a place of like, wow, this is truth. All that stuff I thought I was is not who I am. And it does, yeah, it helps a lot.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to just add to that, Amin, as well. And this is just my experience, and people may disagree with this, but my personal experience was, I was very, very insecure when I was in my late teens and throughout my teens, really, in my early 20s, and I started playing around got into self-development, and I played around with building an identity. And I remember there were these exercises that I used to do, which was like, imagine the kind of guy you want to be, and I would kind of imagine like a James Bond type thing, because that was my imagination, and like how would he walk and how would he talk, and it was helpful, it was helpful to the level that it was helpful. And what happened was, I became really, really good at putting on that mask, and there's this saying like, fake it until you make it. And it looked like I was making it. It was looked like I was faking it, and I started incorporating some of those positive traits that I wanted. And then when push came to shove, and I mean this happened for me about 5 years ago. I'd been around the self-development community at that point for about 7-8 years, and something happened. I came out of a relationship, and bang, I was straight back to who I was before. And I was like, oh wow, I can fake it and fake it really well, but the underlying thing, something hasn't shifted for me. And what I found, and again, I'm not saying you need to do this, but from what I found is actually letting go rather than adding an identity. When I just let go of my story, when I just let go of everything, there was something in there, like Amy was talking about earlier on about a child. There was something really strong in there that I hadn't even realized. And that was the most powerful thing, in every area of my life. So, like, from relationships, I became far, far more attractive when I was me, not like what I thought, like I need to be this James Bond figure, but there were other things that are, like, cool about me, about how I show up, and that emerged. And then when it came to, like, work and career, I'm not trying to be someone else, but I get to be me, and then that kind of comes out. So I just wanted to add that too, that I have a different experience, and so whilst it's cool to play with that, and I'm not telling you what to do or not to do, but you might find that there's something deeper and beyond kind of trying out other identities, and just slowing down and seeing what emerges, which is your true identity.
Thank you. It makes sense.
Cool. Thank you. So I've got one more question which I had before the webcast. I wanted to get it in, and I won't say the gentleman's name because it might be a little bit embarrassing for him. But he was talking about addiction to masturbation, and what he said is, what do you do when biology takes over? So in his mind, it's a biological thing where he has that urge, and he's finding it hard to stop. And this may apply to many people who are maybe a little bit embarrassed to say it or talk about it, but what role does biology play in our habits?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I mean, there's no question that There is sometimes, like with a lot of habits, there's a physical addiction, smoking, for example, or, it's like that's biology in a sense. Your brain is craving that drug, or, there are certain real biological urges that come up. I think it's just helpful to kind of see that there's what our biology is doing, and then there's our experience of it, and that they're two separate things. So one is just us kind of seeing, okay, this is what my body, my brain, whatever is telling me and pushing me in this direction, giving me right now at this moment. And then there's us, which is much bigger than just our biology even, and that even physical experience is still a human experience that's going to come and go. So we ultimately have a say in what we want to do and what makes sense to us, and so like when I was binge eating, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I think I should just go to the store and buy a bunch of food right now. It was like my vision got fuzzy, I would shake, I mean, it was serious, it was physical, but kind of starting to see, and I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but it is it is sort of like kind of coming to see, okay, my body's really into this, like this feels like it has to happen now. But I know something about that. I know I'm okay. In my wisdom, I know it's going to pass like everything else. And the more I started just letting it pass, like the less it came around. And when it did come around, it did feel more flat. It did feel like an idea rather than this huge physical have-to-do-it experience. So it can get deceiving when our body's really involved or your brain's really involved. But see if you can just hold that idea in your mind that it's actually the same, and it'll operate in that same way.
Yeah, and it's kind of almost getting that it can only, like, it can be, for me, it can be like a split thing, whether it's like chocolate or food, or if I used to binge watch TV, and sometimes it can only be like half a second, right? Like it could be a half a second gap of just noticing, like, what am I doing, and just a little bit more awareness, and sometimes that's all that's needed, and in that half a second, you're right, it kind of loses that pull, and what I really love about what you're saying, Amy, I mean, the group that I run is called the Powerful Men's Group, and what I heard in just you said is it's about just seeing how powerful we really are, and that our habits and addictions don't really have power over us, even though it looks like they do at times. Yeah. And it's kind of just waking up to the fact that that's not true.
It's like a paradox in a way. There's like, I mean, they don't have any power over us, and we and our power and our real power are so much bigger than anything our brain or our body can throw at us, or that life out there can throw at us. We have something that's far bigger than all of that. And at the same time, we're human beings. So there are going to be times when it just feels like too much, and we just do it. And that's back to what we were saying in the beginning. Like when that happens, the worst thing I think people can do as they're leaving habits behind is expect it to be this perfect linear path and get really upset with themselves. Like track it, count the days or whatever. I mean, again, and I nothing is horrible. For some people, counting the days is actually a helpful thing. But in general, it keeps that focus on the behavior or the thought or the substance or whatever it is, and it forgets the fact that we're human and we do get caught up in thought. It's part of the human design. It's perfect that we do that. It helps us in many ways. We get lost in thought and don't see that it's thought, or biology or whatever. We don't see that it's going to move through us. So, we are super powerful, and at the same time, we're human beings. That's just part of the design that's going to happen.
That's great, and we've kind of pretty much run out. We had a question around building a habit and how to build habits, but I think that's kind of a separate webinar. So maybe we can cover that on a different webinar one day. But thank you so much for being on this. What I'm keen to do before we finish is, if people want, they've got a taste for this and they see something in this, right? They can see, okay, I can kind of see what Amy's saying, and they want a bit more. There's another opportunity to plug your book, but what can they do? How can they kind of get more of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think just starting with the easy steps, and what I'd love to do, if it's possible, is share. I have a PDF of just like the introduction to the book, which gives a good kind of what we talked about here, kind of sums it up. You know, it tells a little more of my story. So maybe I could just share that with the group, and they can see
Sure.
if they like the book. So that would be the first step, is maybe just checking out the book if that appeals to you. I have a video course that goes along with the book, kind of like a companion course. So that's another sort of easy level of entry. Like if you think it's interesting and you want a little more, there's 20 video lessons that go along with that. So that's, you know, relatively easy. You can find that at my website. And then I do work, you know, one-on-one with people at times in all kinds of different ways. So that's an option as well.
And is that video course a paid thing, or is that available for free? Do people have to pay for that?
Well, the video course, the companion course, is a paid thing, but I have other videos. So maybe, I mean, my website's just dramyjohnson.com. I'm sure I can put it on the page and stuff. But yeah.
Cool. And if someone wants to get in touch with you and hire you, do you work with one-on-one? Do you work over Skype? Because I know a lot of our members probably aren't going to be locally close to you.
Yep, I do all kinds of Skype.
Cool. And it's just say your website again.
It's dramyjohnson.com. So it's just dramyjohnson.com.
Fantastic. And really, really glad that you spent some time with us. I think that was incredibly valuable. I found it valuable. It was a good thing for me to listen to. If anyone wants to get hold of Amy and for whatever reason you can't get hold of her website or anything else, you can get hold of me. If you want to send me the PDF, Amy, I'll post it in the group as well. Anything that's really helpful to people, I'm happy to do. And again, if there's anything that you were shy about asking and you didn't really feel comfortable, you know, please get in touch with Amy or myself. I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So thank you so much.
I mean, if there are follow-up questions or topics that come out of this, I mean, I'm happy to do this again at some point, or yeah, definitely, like you said, speak with people individually. But yeah, happy to do whatever makes sense for everyone.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, and I'll see you guys on the next webinar, and I'm sure, Amy, I'll see you on another webinar or at a conference or convention or something in the future.
All right, thank you.